Hi, welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. Great to have you in the conversation. I'm going to play a soundbite from Judge Roy Moore here in just a second. Just before I do that, I want to mention something that's going on in North Carolina. These guys are absolutely right to do this. They are within constitutional parameters to do this. This is a story from the Huffington Post. So again, I don't know if there's some kind of distortion involved in this story, but here's the story as the Huffington Post gives it to us. Republican North Carolina state legislators have proposed allowing an official state religion in a measure that would declare the state exempt from the Constitution and court rulings. Here is the wording of Section 1 of the bill. I'm reading now from the bill itself. The North Carolina General Assembly asserts that the Constitution of the United States of America does not prohibit states or their subsidiaries from making laws respecting an establishment of religion. Now, this is absolutely constitutional. It is completely 100% constitutionally permissible. Because remember what the first word in the First Amendment is. Anybody remember first word in the First Amendment, the Bill of Rights? It is the word Congress. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Congress shall make no law. Congress shall make no law. I repeat, Congress shall make no law. The only entity, the only political entity that is prohibited from acting, that is prohibited from establishing a religion by the Constitution of the United States is the federal government. It's the Congress of the United States. They are not allowed to even pass a law that touches on the subject of the establishment of religion. Now, the point obviously was to tie the hands of the central government so that it was not allowed to pick one Christian denomination and make it the official church of the United States. That's what it means to establish a religion. By religion, they meant some denomination of Christianity. By establish, they meant give it standing in law, require everybody to support it with their tax dollars. That's what it meant to have an established church. It was an official church in law, and everybody had to support it with their tax dollars. That was an established church. And the founder said, look, we are not going to repeat the mistake in England. We're not going to have one established Christian denomination that everybody's got to support with their tax dollars for this whole country. Not going to do it. We're going to prohibit Congress from doing anything like that, but we are going to permit the states to do it if they want to. So the issue of regulating religious expression was reserved for the states, exclusively for the states. The states could have an established religion if they wanted to. The states could pick one Christian denomination. They could make it the official church of their state, and they could require people to support it with tax dollars. And at the time of the founding, 9 of the 13 states had an established church. They had a Christian denomination that was officially approved in law, was the official expression of Christianity, the official religion for that state. That was constitutionally permissible. It was constitutionally permitted. The founders had absolutely no problem with that. In fact, they were protecting the right of states to do it. They said, we're not going to let the Congress do this because that would intrude in the freedom and the liberty and the right of states to decide these matters of religious establishment for themselves. So what North Carolina is doing here, you're going to hear a lot of bloviation and outrage and weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth and rending of garments. But what they are doing here is absolutely permissible under the Constitution as it was given to us by the founders. Now, I'm not saying as it's been mangled by the courts. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about the mangling, the distorting, the shredding of the Constitution that's been done by activist judges. I am talking about the Constitution as it was delivered to us by the founding fathers. That Constitution, the one that ought to govern the way we do things in America, does not prohibit a state from having an established religion. And that's all this law in North Carolina is saying. They're saying, look, we are not prohibited from making a law respecting an establishment of religion. All they're saying is we can do it if we want to, and they are exactly right. This, by the way, is why I have always argued that states can prohibit the building of mosques in their state if they choose to do it. Now, I know there's discussion among legal scholars about this, and I am in the distinct minority. This is my own personal opinion. I'm not speaking for anybody but myself when I say this, but that was the whole point of the First Amendment, was to protect the right of states to regulate religious expression as they saw fit. So if a state decides, look, Islam is a threat to public safety, it is a threat to the security of the individuals of this state, we are going to prohibit the building of any more mosques in our state as a matter of public safety. They can do it constitutionally. This is exactly what Joseph Story said back in 1840. He was the longest-serving Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court. He wrote the first definitive history of the Constitution, and he said, look, that was the whole point of the First Amendment. Let me see if I can find his exact words here. I've got it written down somewhere here in the flyleaf of my Bible because I think it's so important. This is Joseph Story from the definitive history of the Constitution. The real object of the First Amendment was not to countenance, much less to advance Mohammedanism or Judaism or infidelity, by which he meant atheism, by prostrating Christianity, but to exclude all rivalry among Christian sects or denominations and to prevent any national ecclesiastical patronage of the national government. So he says, look, when they wrote the First Amendment, the purpose of it, the real object was not to countenance Mohammedanism or Judaism or atheism. What does countenance mean? It means to consider, to look at, to make the object of your concern. They weren't even that's his point. When they wrote the First Amendment, they weren't even countenancing, they weren't even thinking about alternatives to Christianity. They weren't even dealing with Islam. They weren't dealing with Judaism. They weren't dealing with atheism. They were dealing with the various Christian denominations that were already in existence. And they're saying, we want to prevent rivalry among the various Christian denominations. That was the object of the First Amendment. So my point simply is that North Carolina is absolutely constitutionally correct in doing what they have set out to do. This is the wording of the bill. The North Carolina General Assembly asserts that the Constitution of the United States of America does not prohibit states or their subsidiaries from making laws respecting an establishment of religion. They are absolutely constitutionally correct in doing this. Now, by 1833, all of the states had gotten rid of their established state churches, and that was the right thing to do. I am not a supporter of an established church. I don't think it's a good idea. I think there ought to be a free market when it comes to the displays of Christianity, just like there's a free market for oranges and cars. I think there ought to be a free market, allow people to choose the church that ministers to them the most effectively. So I'm not for an established church. I'm against that. I don't want one Christian denomination picked as the official church. I don't want to be forced to support it with my taxpayer dollars any more than you do. Let's pick our own places of worship. Let's support them freely with our own voluntary contributions. By 1833, every state had made that decision. All right, well, listen, I got off on that, a little bit long-winded, didn't intend even to go there, but there we are. So let's go to the phones. We've got some people waiting patiently. Let's go to Rose in Lakeland, Florida. Bring Rose. Okay, let me see if I can get Rose. Rose in Lakeland, Florida. Welcome to Focal Point. What's on your mind?
I just want to say when Bill O'Reilly and others like him scream Bible thumpers, let's thump our Bibles even more and say thank you. That's exactly what we are told to do in the Bible. We are told to take up the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God, and they're scared to death of it.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you saying that, Rose. It's interesting to me. We were talking about this in our production meeting this morning. When people thought, well, we got to use social science. Bill O'Reilly says you got to use social science. Got to stay away from the Bible. Can't thump the Bible. Got to use social research. Well, we do. But that's not the only thing we do, and that's not where we start. Our authority is the Word of God. And the point I made in our production meeting this morning, the Bible never says that social research is living and active and more powerful than any two-edged sword. It doesn't say that. It says the Word of God is living and active and sharper than any two-edged sword and able to divide between soul and spirit. In other words, the power is found in the Word of God. So the power, the Word of God has the power to shatter unbelief. It has the power, if it's spoken, if it's declared, it has the power to shatter unbelief. It has the power to pull down veils. It has the power to dispel darkness. It has the power to dispel deception and unbelief in the way that nothing else in the world does. That's why whatever else we do, we need to be declaring the Word of God, thumping our Bibles, if you want to use that expression, because that is where the power is found. That's what's living. That's what's active. That's what's sharper than any two-edged sword, way sharper than social research or history. Let's go back to the phones. Let us go to Ron, Granville, Ohio. Ron, thanks for calling. Thanks for waiting. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Brian. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Go right ahead.
Brian, yesterday you reminded me of when you said that, once again, that we're made in the image of God. It brought back to me a sermon I heard on American Family Radio in the evening. I drive packages around, and I'm behind the wheel 16 hours a day, so I listen to you guys just to get me through the day. And one of the greatest sermons, he wasn't even preaching about the gay issue, but it cleared up for me the problem I've always had with those individuals who are, in fact, born with either both sex organs or little girls that are born and they're hairier than, guys are, obvious hormones are just out of whack.
Right, you're talking about something that's exceptionally rare.
Well, Adrian Rogers brought out something to me. He, as I said, he wasn't preaching about the gay issue. He wanted to get to the point about the resurrection, which was the payoff for me. But he said, don't tell me we're made in the image of God. Look around you. He said, do you think God looks like this madhouse that we're living in right now? He said, go back to Genesis 5, and right off the bat it says, man and woman he created in his image. And then Adam, who was like 90 or 92, I forget, lay with Eve and had Seth, and Seth was made in the image of Adam. In other words, we're all made in the image of the fallen man.
All right. Well, listen, James, I got to let you go. We're out of time. Good point. Focal Point AFR Talk back in 2 minutes. Stay with us.